Hi friends, let me ask you something before we even begin. Have you ever felt trapped? Not trapped in a room, not trapped in a building, but trapped inside yourself. Trapped by something you can't see, can't touch, can't explain to another human being. Something that follows you when you wake up in the morning. Something that whispers to you at night when the world goes quiet and there's nothing left between you and your own thoughts. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, no matter how many times you start over, no matter how many promises you make to yourself at the beginning of every new year, every new month, every new Monday morning, something pulls you back? Like an invisible rope tied around your ankle. You run, you push, you fight, and still you end up in the same place, same patterns, same pain, same you. If you've ever felt that, then this speech is for you. Because today we're going to talk about a man who felt that too. A man who was born into this world, just like you and me, carrying the weight of everything that came before him. A man who could have lived an ordinary life. A man who could have accepted the chains and called them destiny. But he didn't. His name was Paramahansa Yogananda. And what he discovered, what he lived, what he breathed, what he sacrificed everything to understand, changed the course of human history. Not just for yogis on mountaintops. Not just for monks in monasteries. But for every single human being who has ever asked the question that you are probably asking right now. Why does my life feel like this? Stay with me. Because what I'm about to share with you in the next hour is not just philosophy. It is not just spirituality. It is the most practical, the most urgent, the most life-altering truth you may ever encounter. And it begins with one word, karma. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've heard that word before. Maybe you've used it casually. Karma got him. What goes around comes around. You put it on a bumper sticker. You put it in a tweet. You dismissed it as something mystical, something ancient, something that doesn't apply to your very modern, very busy, very complicated life. But friends, what if karma is the most misunderstood word in the English language? What if everything you think you know about it is only the surface? What if underneath that word, beneath the bumper stickers and the social media posts, there is a truth so deep, so personal, so devastatingly accurate about your life that when you finally understand it, you will never see yourself the same way again. Let me start with a story. Not Yogananda's story. Not yet. I want to start with yours. Think about a habit you have. Just one. Maybe it's the way you react when someone criticizes you. You go quiet or you go cold or you explode and later you wonder, why did I do that again? Maybe it's the way you self-sabotage. You're getting close to success. You can feel it. You can almost touch it. And then something in you pulls back. You make an excuse. You create a crisis. You walk away from the very thing you said you wanted. Maybe it's the way you love. You give everything, and then you give more, and then you wonder why you always end up exhausted, overlooked, alone. These patterns, these invisible scripts, these reactions that happen before you even have a chance to think. Where do they come from? You didn't choose them. You don't even like them. You've tried to change them 100 times, and yet there they are, every single morning, looking back at you in the mirror. This, friends, is what karma actually is. Not punishment, not cosmic revenge, not the universe getting back at you for something you did wrong last Tuesday. Karma is the momentum of your past decisions, impressed into the very fabric of who you are. It is the groove worn into the record of your soul by every thought you've ever repeated, every emotion you've ever reinforced, every action you've ever taken. It is the software that was installed in you, some of it in this lifetime, some of it, Yogananda would say, across lifetimes, that runs automatically in the background of everything you do. And here is the terrifying part. Here is the part that most people never stop long enough to realize. Most of us will live our entire lives and never question the software. We will think the program is us. We will identify completely with the patterns, the fears, the limitations, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. And we will call that identity. We will call that personality. We will call that just the way I am. And we will never be free. Now, enter Yogananda. Born on January 5, 1893 in Gorakhpur, India. He comes into this world in a middle-class family. His father is a disciplined mathematical man who works for the railway. His mother is deeply spiritual, devotional, warm. And she will not be with him for long. He is the fourth of 8 children. An ordinary beginning. A house full of noise and siblings and the complicated, beautiful mess of family life. But from the very beginning, there is something different about this child. He has experiences that other children don't talk about. He sees lights around people. He goes into states of deep stillness that frighten those around him. He is drawn, magnetically, irresistibly drawn, to spiritual seekers, to wandering monks, to anyone who seems to carry within them some knowledge of a world beyond the visible one. And from his earliest years, he is asking the question, not what will I be when I grow up? Not how will I make money? Not how will I be respected? He is asking, who am I really? Beyond this body, beyond this name, beyond the story I've been given, who am I at the deepest level of my existence? That question is the beginning of freedom. Now, here's what I need you to understand about Yogananda's early life. Because people look at saints and masters and great spiritual teachers and they make a critical mistake. They assume these people had it easy. They assume they were born enlightened, born peaceful, born free from the struggle that torment the rest of us. Friends, nothing could be further from the truth. Yogananda suffered deeply, personally, profoundly. When he was 11 years old, his mother died just like that. The woman who was his first experience of unconditional love, the woman who introduced him to devotion, the woman whose warmth was the center of his world, gone. And young Mukunda, as he was called then, was left standing at the edge of a grief so vast, so incomprehensible, that it could have consumed him entirely. Can you imagine that? 11 years old, the person you love most is gone, and the world just keeps moving. The world has no patience for your grief. The world says, grow up, move on, be strong, don't be weak. And here is where most of us would close. Here is where most of us put a lock on our hearts and say, I will never feel that again. I will build walls. I will armor myself. I will control everything I can possibly control so that nothing will ever hurt me like this again. And that closing, that armoring, becomes karma. Because every time you close instead of opening, you carve a deeper groove in the record. You reinforce the pattern. You make the automatic response more automatic. You bury a little more of your true self beneath the protection. But Yogananda did something different. He turned toward the pain instead of away from it. He took his grief and his longing and his desperate need for love that would not abandon him, and he turned it into a search. Not a desperate, frantic, grasping search, but a deep, committed, unwavering search for the source of love itself. He began to seek God the way a drowning man seeks air. Not casually, not conveniently, not on Sundays when he had nothing better to do, with everything he had, with his whole being. And this, friends, is the first lesson Yogananda teaches us about karma. You cannot free yourself from the patterns of your past by running away from them. You cannot outrun karma. You cannot move to a new city, start a new relationship, get a new job, buy new clothes, and leave karma behind. Because karma is not outside you. It is inside you. It travels with you always and everywhere until the day you turn around and face it. The turning, the facing, that is where freedom begins. Now, Yogananda spent years searching. He went from teacher to teacher, from ashram to ashram, from text to text, seeking someone who could show him not just the theory of liberation, but the actual, practical, lived experience of it. He was not interested in philosophy for its own sake. He was not interested in impressing people with his knowledge. He wanted to know, directly, immediately, personally. And then he found his teacher, Sri Yukteswar. Let me paint you a picture of this moment, because it is one of the most significant moments in the history of spiritual seeking. Yogananda is a young man, restless, burning, full of questions and longing. He is wandering through the lanes of Baneras, and a friend takes him to meet this unusual teacher. This man who carries himself with a stillness and a clarity that seems to belong to another order of reality entirely. And Sri Yukteswar looks at this young man, this young Mukunda who is on fire with seeking, and he says something extraordinary. He says, you have come home. Not, welcome to my ashram. Not, let me tell you about my teachings. He looks through all the layers of personality and karma and conditioning, looks into the essential nature of this young soul, and says, you have come home. That moment changed everything. Because here is what Sri Yukteswar understood, and what Yogananda would spend the rest of his life transmitting to the world. True spiritual teaching is not the transfer of information. It is the recognition of what was already present beneath all the information. The real you, the you that exists beneath the karma, beneath the conditioning, beneath the patterns and fears and stories, was never trapped. It was only forgotten. Think about this. Think about this very carefully. If you have a gold coin and you cover it in layers of dirt and mud and soot, the gold doesn't disappear. It doesn't stop being gold. It is still gold all the way through. The covering is not the coin. The covering is just the covering. Your karma is the covering. Your karma is the covering. Your conditioning is the... Your habitual patterns and automatic reactions are the mud. Underneath all of that, untouched and untouchable, unchanged and unchangeable, is your true nature. Your pure consciousness, yourself with a capital S. Yogananda's entire life and teaching was devoted to one thing: burning away the covering, layer by layer, groove by groove, pattern by pattern, until nothing remained but the gold. But here's the crucial thing that separates Yogananda's approach from every comfortable, convenient, self-help version of this idea you may have encountered. Burning away karma is not easy. Let me say that again, because I want you to feel it in your body, not just hear it with your ears. It is not easy. It is the hardest thing a human being can undertake. Harder than climbing a mountain, harder than building a business, harder than raising a child. Because climbing a mountain uses your muscles. Building a business uses your intelligence. Raising a child uses your love. But burning away karma requires you to dismantle the very self that you have been your entire life. It requires you to question every assumption you have ever made about who you are. It requires you to sit with discomfort that has no name, to face fears that have no form, to release identities that feel as fundamental to you as breathing. Most people, when they encounter this requirement, find a reason to stop. They read a few books. They go to a weekend retreat. They feel better for a while. And then the patterns come back. Of course they come back. And they say, this doesn't work. Or worse, they say, I'm just not the kind of person who can change. And they go back to sleep. Yogananda didn't go back to sleep. Under Sri Yukteswar's guidance, he entered into a training that was, by any modern standard, extraordinarily rigorous. Sri Yukteswar was not a soft teacher. He was not interested in making his students feel good in the short term. He was interested in their actual, permanent liberation. And to that end, he pushed, he challenged, he corrected. He refused to indulge the ego's endless capacity for self-deception. There is a story, and this story is so important. I want you to really sit with it. There is a story of Yogananda coming to Sri Yukteswar one day, proud of something he had accomplished, expecting praise, expecting to be told, well done, my son, you have progressed. And Sri Yukteswar looked at him and said something cutting, something that deflated the pride completely, something that to the ego felt like humiliation. And Yogananda's first reaction, because he was human, because he had a human ego, because even the greatest souls in human form have that reactive, defensive, wounded part, his first reaction was hurt, was anger, was the very human desire to say, that's not fair. And then, and this is the miracle, he paused. He took that reaction, that hurt, that anger, that wounded pride, and instead of expressing it, instead of defending it, instead of feeding it with the story of how he was misunderstood and underappreciated, he watched it. He became a witness to his own reaction. He asked the deepest question available to him in that moment. Who is this that is hurt? Who is this that feels diminished? Is that me? Is that truly who I am? And in the space of that question, the reaction began to dissolve. Not suppressed, not pushed down, not locked in a drawer to come back later with compound interest. Dissolved, released, gone. That is the difference between managing karma and actually transcending it. Most of us, when we work on ourselves, we are managing, we are coping. We are developing better strategies for navigating our patterns rather than actually dismantling the patterns themselves. We go to therapy and we get better at understanding our triggers. We practice mindfulness and we get a few more seconds between stimulus and response. We develop emotional intelligence and we become more skillful at handling our reactions, and all of that is valuable. All of that is progress. Please don't misunderstand me. Those things matter, but they are not liberation. Liberation is not better management of your karma. Liberation is the actual dissolution of the grooves themselves, the complete rewriting of the deepest software, the recovery of a freedom so fundamental that you no longer react from fear, Because there is no longer any fear at the root level to react from. To react from. That is what Yogananda was after. And that is what Sri Yukteswar was helping him achieve. Not by being gentle, by being ruthlessly, lovingly, permanently honest. Now I want to talk about meditation, because you cannot tell the story of Yogananda without talking about meditation. And I want to talk about it not as a technique, not as a wellness practice, not as something you do for 20 minutes in the morning to reduce your cortisol levels, but as the most radical, most revolutionary, most fundamentally transformative act a human being can undertake. Meditation, in the tradition that Yogananda taught, is not relaxation. It is not visualization. It is not positive thinking with your eyes closed. Meditation, true meditation, is the practice of bringing your awareness to the place where karma lives and watching it from a position of conscious, unidentified presence until it loses its power over you. Think of it this way. Imagine your mind as a movie theater, and karma is the film that's playing. Every habitual thought, every automatic reaction, every fear-based pattern. These are the images on the screen. Most of us, most of the time, are completely absorbed in the film. We forget we are in the audience. We forget there is an audience. We think we are the characters on the screen. We laugh when they laugh. We cry when they cry. We are terrified when they are terrified. The film is our whole reality. Meditation, real meditation, is the act of sitting back in your seat and remembering, I am not the film. I am the one watching the film. I am not my thoughts. I am the awareness in which thoughts arise. I am not my emotions. I am the consciousness observes emotions. I am not my karma. I am the self that was never touched by karma, that was never affected by the past, that exists in a dimension that is completely prior to all patterns and conditioning. When you establish yourself in that perspective, even for a moment, even for a single breath, something begins to change. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in the way that water changes stone, slowly, consistently, permanently. Every moment of conscious awareness is a moment of freedom from karma. Every moment you observe a thought instead of being the thought, you weaken the groove. Every moment you choose your response instead of running your automatic program, you rewrite the software. This is what Yogananda practiced every single day, for years, for decades, not casually, not to his convenient, not when it was convenient. With absolute dedication, absolute consistency, absolute prioritization, he chose meditation over sleep. He chose practice over social approval. He chose his inner development over his comfort, his convenience, his reputation, his safety. And the results were extraordinary. Yeah, and the results were extraordinary. People who met Yogananda in person, not just those who studied with him for years, but people who encountered him briefly for a few minutes in a crowd, reported experiences that are almost impossible to describe in ordinary language. A feeling of profound peace, a sudden clarity about their own lives, a sense of being seen, truly seen at the deepest level of their being, a momentary experience of the silence and the stillness and the love that exists beneath all the noise of the world. Why? How? Because Yogananda had done the work. Because he had burned away so much of the karmic covering that the light of his true nature shone through with barely any obstruction. And that light, pure, unconditional, completely free, affected everyone who came near. This is why the great teachers are always talking about their own inner work. Not because they're being selfish, not because they're navel-gazing, because the most powerful thing any human being can do for this world is to become more free themselves. Because your freedom is contagious. Your peace is contagious. Your love, when it is genuine, when it comes from the deepest level of your being and not from the ego's need to be loved back, your love changes the people around you without a single word being spoken. Now I want to talk about something that most motivational speeches avoid. Because it's uncomfortable. Because it doesn't fit the simple narrative. Because it complicates the story. I want to talk about the people who opposed Yogananda, because karma doesn't just operate inside an individual. It operates between individuals, between communities, between cultures. Then when someone begins to transcend their personal karma, they inevitably encounter the collective karma of those around them. Yogananda came to America in 1920, a young Indian man, barely 30 years old, wearing flowing robes, speaking with an accent, carrying ideas that had no category in the Western mind, landing in a country that was, in many ways, deeply suspicious of anything that didn't fit its own established worldview. He was laughed at, he was dismissed. He was written off as a mystic, a charlatan, an exotic curiosity. Some people tried to destroy his reputation. Some tried to discredit his teachings. Some who worked with him, whom he trusted, whom he loved, betrayed him publicly, painfully, in ways that had real consequences for the organization he was building and the mission he was trying to accomplish. And what did Yogananda do with all of this? He kept going, not with bitterness, not with the hard defensive energy of someone who is enduring opposition and seething inside. But with the quality that is, to me, the most astonishing thing about his life and one of the clearest demonstrations that he had genuinely transcended the karma that would trap most of us. He kept going with love, not sentimental love, not the love that needs to be loved back, not the love that is contingent on being treated well, on being appreciated, on being understood. The love that simply flows because it has no choice, because it comes from a source that is inexhaustible, because it exists independently of anything the outer world does or says or thinks. He would say, and this is one of the most challenging things he ever taught, one of the things that requires the most maturity and the most inner work to actually practice. He would say that your enemies are among your greatest teachers. Because here is the karmic reality. When someone triggers you, when someone says something that sends you into a spiral, that presses a button, that activates a pattern, they are not creating something new in you. They are revealing something that was already there. They are holding up a mirror to a groove in your soul that has been there, waiting for perhaps a very long time. The person who makes you furious is showing you where you are not yet free. The situation that makes you desperate with fear is showing you where you have not yet healed. The relationship that makes you lose yourself completely is showing you where you still need yourself. Every trigger is a teacher. Every difficulty is a doorway. Every moment of darkness is an invitation to find and strengthen the light within you. This is not passive. This is not resignation. This is not rolling over and accepting poor treatment in the name of spiritual growth. Yogananda was not a pushover. He had fierce clarity. He had strong opinions. He spoke truth to power when it was required. But he did all of it from a place of inner stability that was not threatened by opposition, not diminished by criticism, not destabilized by the ups and downs of the outer world, because he had done the inner work. Because the ground he stood on was not the ground of ego, which is always shifting, always defensive, always dependent on the approval of others, but the ground of self, the unshakable, unbreakable, unalterable ground of pure consciousness. And that, friends, is the goal. That is what freedom from karma actually looks like in a human life, not the absence of challenges. Not a life free of difficulties or opposition or pain, but an inner stability that is not shaken by any of it. A ground so solid that the storms of the world can come and go, and the depth of you remains untouched. Now I want to ask you a question, and I want you to really sit with it. What would your life look like if you were truly free? Not free in the political sense, not free in the financial sense, but free in the deepest, most personal, most intimate sense. Free from the story you've been telling about yourself since you were a child. Free from the belief that you are not enough, that you are too much, that you are too much, that you don't deserve the good things, that the good things won't last, that you have to earn love, that you have to perform for approval, that you have to be small so that other people feel comfortable, that you have to be strong so that no one will see your vulnerability, that you have to be someone other than exactly who you are. Free from the pattern of self-sabotage, from the habit of getting to the edge of something good and then destroying it, from the voice in your head that says, who do you think you are? You don't get to have this. People like you don't get to have this. Free from the fear of death that makes you too afraid to really live. Free from the resentments that you carry like stones in your pockets, weighing you down, poisoning your present because you cannot release the past. What would your life look like? Who would you be? What would you create? What would you create? Take a moment, really, let yourself feel that. Let yourself feel the full weight and the full beauty of that possibility. Because here's what I need you to understand, and this is the heart of everything Yogananda taught. The central truth that his entire life was a demonstration of. That freedom is not a dream. It is not a fantasy. It is not reserved for saints and sages born in another century. It is not your reward if you're good enough, if you meditate long enough, if you do enough yoga, if you read enough books. That freedom is your birthright. Right now, today, as you are, where you are, the karma is a covering. And coverings can be removed. The conditioning is a program, and programs can be rewritten. The patterns are grooves in a record, and records can be changed, not instantly, not without effort, not without the willingness to face what needs to be faced and feel what needs to be felt, and release what has been held far too long, but completely, truly, permanently. Yogananda proved it with his life. Let me tell you about the last years of that life, because they are as instructive as the beginning. By the 1940s, Yogananda had been in America for more than 2 decades. He had built a spiritual organization, the Self-Realization Fellowship that reached hundreds of thousands of people. He had written the book that would go on to become one of the most widely read spiritual autobiographies in history. Autobiography of a Yogi. A book that would land in the hands of Steve Jobs, would influence the Beatles, would change the lives of millions of people across cultures and generations and decades. He had achieved by any external measure extraordinary things. And yet in those final years he withdrew. He retreated into a depth of practice and prayer and stillness that those around him found almost difficult to be near, because the peace that emanated from him was so profound, so absolute, so complete that it seemed to belong to another dimension of existence entirely. He was burning away the last layers. He was completing the work. And on March 7, 1952, after delivering a speech at a banquet honoring the Indian ambassador to the United States, Paramahansa Yogananda stood up, spoke his last words, beautiful words, words about the eternal, about the divine, about the love that underlies all of existence, and then quietly, peacefully, completely consciously left his body. Those who were there reported that his face in the days that followed showed no signs of physical deterioration. The doctors were baffled. Even in death, his body seemed to be operating under different rules. As though the freedom he had achieved in life extended even to the body's final transition. He died as he had lived, in complete freedom. Now, I don't tell you this to make Yogananda seem superhuman. I tell you this because I want you to understand the stakes. I want you to understand what is actually available to a human being who commits fully, completely, without reservation, to the project of their own liberation. We are not just talking about being happier. We are not just talking about being more successful, more confident, more productive. We are talking about a fundamental transformation of what it means to be human. We are talking about the actual lived experience of a freedom that most people have never even imagined, because the culture we live in has never told us it was possible. But it is possible. It has always been possible. And the path to it begins right now with a choice. Let me talk about that choice, because this is where Yogananda's teaching meets your Monday morning. This is where the philosophy lands on the pavement of your actual life. The choice is not a dramatic one. It doesn't happen in a single moment of cinematic clarity. It doesn't require you to leave everything behind, go to India, find a cave, and spend the next decade meditating. Although if you want to do that, I'm not stopping you. The choice happens in the small moments. In the moments that don't seem significant at all. It happens when someone says something that irritates you and you have a fraction of a second, just a fraction, before you react. And in that fraction of a second, you can choose to run the automatic program. Or you can choose to pause and ask, who is this that is irritated? Is that truly who I am? It happens when you sit down to meditate, and within 30 seconds, your mind is going in 17 different directions, and the voice in your head is saying, this is pointless. You're bad at this. You'll never be the kind of person who can meditate. You might as well get up and check your phone. And you can choose to believe that voice, or you can choose to notice it, label it as thought, let it pass, and return to your breath. It happens when you are on the edge of something great. A new project, a new relationship, a new version of yourself. And the familiar fear rises up and says, you're going to fail. You always fail. Better to stay small, stay safe, stay where you know the rule. And you can choose to let that fear make your decisions, or you can choose to feel the fear completely and take the step anyway. Every one of these choices is a battle against karma. Every one of these choices made in the direction of consciousness rather than automation weakens the groove a little, makes the next choice a little easier, creates a little more space between stimulus and response, builds over time the capacity for a freedom that eventually becomes your natural state rather than something you have to fight for every moment. This is the work. This is the actual work. Not the big dramatic moments of spiritual breakthrough. Those come, but they are not the primary site of transformation. The primary site is here, now, in the ordinary moments of your ordinary day. Yogananda understood this. He said that every moment of every day is an opportunity for practice. Not just the meditation cushion, not just the prayer, not just the retreat. Every interaction, every difficulty, every moment of joy, every moment of pain, all of it is the curriculum. All of it is the classroom. All of it is the opportunity. The question is whether you are in the classroom consciously as a student who is paying attention, or whether you are sleepwalking through it, looking at your phone, waiting for the bell to ring so you can go home. Now I want to speak directly to some of you, because I know there are people in this room, maybe you're one of them, who are carrying something very heavy, something that has been with you for a long time. Maybe it's a grief that never fully resolved, a loss that changed the shape of your life. A trauma that installed itself so deeply in your nervous system that you sometimes wonder if you will ever be free of it.